everybody. We've got quite a good turnout this evening. We've got people tuned in from America, Canada, and all over, lots from South Africa so far. It's good to have you here. I'm Lynette Rudman, and I'm coming to you live from Grahamstown in South Africa. This webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on our Learn the Birds YouTube channel in a few days' time, so you can watch it at your leisure afterwards as well. Please post any questions or interesting comments in the chat box below, and our guest speaker will answer them. Now, we have a special guest speaker, Elizabeth Szekeres. Elizabeth is a geographer with a master's degree in environmental studies. Elizabeth was originally from England. She was born there, and she grew up in Canada with parents who were great walkers and nature lovers. Elizabeth was a free-range child living close to the north shore of Lake Ontario, Rattray Marsh, and the last intact wetland in the Greater Toronto area was her playground. Since Elizabeth retired from full-time work in 2017, she has spent a lot of time traveling the globe to explore the natural world and to observe birds. Prior to the COVID-19 epidemic, or pandemic, I should rather say, she visited many countries. On her list is New Zealand, Southern Africa, Hungary, Spain, Ecuador, the USA. She's been to California, Oregon, the Galapagos Islands. Wow, I'm really jealous. Costa Rica, Newfoundland, Mexico, and the Sea of Cortez. Once the lockdowns were over, Elizabeth returned to travel. She visited Newfoundland, and she undertook second visits to New Zealand and Costa Rica. And then she went on to visit Antarctica, Iceland, and Greenland this year in 2023. Elizabeth writes the newsletter for her local naturalists club, and she loves to share her stories and photographs of the birds that she observes on her many trips around the world. In tonight's webinar, Elizabeth shares her experiences exploring habitats and colonies through the roots of whalers and the heroic age explorers. Someone talking? Learn about penguins, pinnipeds, and cetaceans, and the other incredible creatures that call the Antarctic home. Now, if you are like me and you didn't know what pinnipeds and cetaceans were, stay tuned. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Lynette. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, pinnipeds are the seals and seal-like creatures of the oceans. Cetaceans are whales and dolphins and so on. Anyway, we'll see a whole bunch of all of these creatures. So I've titled this Antarctica, Lovin the Ice. You might say that I was a lover of the ice because it was magnificent, as you can see from this iceberg. But it's also about love in the ice because, of course, the summer in Antarctica is the time that all of the critters are reproducing. So we will get on from here. So here's the route that we took. We started in Ushuaia in the tip of Argentina, went across the Drake Passage down to the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula and Snow Hill Island. We went back north to Elephant Island. We went across the Scotia Sea to South Georgia. And then we went back down to the South Orkney Islands. And then from there, we went across to Ushuaia. Our trip was supposed to include the Falkland Islands, but there was a hurricane that went through the Drake Passage and prevented us from getting to the Falklands. So it's a thing. You never know what you're going to get when you go to Antarctica. So here's a couple of shots of the port of Ushuaia. Busy place, lots of ships. There's our ship. I was with Adventure Canada, which was partnering with Intrepid on this trip on the ship called the Ocean Endeavor. First bird we saw in the harbor right beside the ship was this flightless steamer duck, and their wings are very short. They don't fly and they just paddle around. So they're quite regulars there. And so here we are setting out from Ushuaia on our way to the Weddell Sea. The trip was originally supposed to go to the west side of the Antarctic Peninsula, but because of the weather and a big storm off the tip of Argentina, we ended up going to the lee side on the east side of the peninsula into the Weddell Sea. And the Weddell Sea is where Shackleton's ship was stuck in the ice and eventually crushed. And so they had to make their way out in lifeboats. So we were recreating that trip to some extent. So leaving Ushuaia, and now we're in the Beagle Channel on our way to the South Atlantic and the Southern Ocean. Nice rainbow on the way. First seabirds we saw, southern giant petrel and a Chilean skua. There's the Chilean skua. Lots of lighthouses in the Beagle Channel. And we had sei whales following our ship at sunset. They were quite far away, so this is hugely cropped in, but still it's enough that you can identify this species of whales. Our ship had many experts on board, including a wonderful gal from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, who is an expert on whales and other cetaceans. So we're looking back at Ushuaia there. You see the glacier up. It's got 3 chunks. That's the Marshall Glacier, which is the water supply for Ushuaia. A nice sunset happening and night beginning to fall. The next morning, we're waking up on the Drake Passage, and we are not on the Drake Shake, we are on the Drake Lake. Not even enough winds for albatrosses to fly. So we didn't have a whole lot of birds following us. But here's the first sight of a glacier on one of the islands of Antarctica. This is a tidewater glacier coming right down to the sea. And that is absolutely massive. You have no sense of the scale, but it's really, really massive. So lots of pinnacles on that leading edge there are going to fall right into the sea at the next high tide. So we did have a lot of fog obscuring our views. First iceberg came by. This is a tabular style, like a table. And so there were bets laid as to when we would see the first iceberg. So this tabular style, they come from an ice sheet. They haven't fallen off of a glacier. But the big ones of these do pose a hazard to navigation. So they are named and numbered and tracked by satellites so that ships don't run into them. We've finally got some seabirds, the southern fulmar following the ship, and some more whales, sei whales again, slender-billed prion, lovely M shape of the dark patch on the wing, white-chinned petrel, light-mantled albatross, and you probably notice this is a bit of a fuzzy picture. So we're on a moving boat shooting a moving subject. So sometimes you don't always capture what you'd exactly like, but it's good for ID purposes. Cape petrels were absolutely spectacular. Beautiful black and white. And Wilson storm petrels with their little feet, they managed to paddle, they use the surface tension of the water to actually kind of pitter patter away on the surface of the water as they look for things to eat. This is a wandering albatross juvenile. and some Antarctic terns. We're along that cliff face. And we're up against an island here with a glacier on it. And I just was really impressed with how this looks like a black and white drawing. And I was really quite transfixed by the interaction, the edges between the moraines and the mountainside and the glacier. The icebergs, of course, were endlessly fascinating. They're like snowflakes. No two are ever alike. And here we are in a zodiac, another fuzzy picture, sorry. But this gives you the impression of the absolutely immense size of this Adelie penguin colony on the side of this island. So there's a whole bunch of them huddling by the shore, very timid to enter the water, these guys are, because the seals lay in wait for them, and they might be cruising along the shore. So when these guys finally enter the water, they go all in a huddle, all very quickly, and they porpoise across the water, swimming as fast as they can. You can see the steepness of the shoreline there, and you wonder how in the heck do they get up there? But they do. They use their claws and their beaks to climb. And sometimes they'll get up but fall back in, but they try again, and eventually they get up. So there was no landing site here. That really steep cliff right at the water's edge meant that there was no way we could go ashore here, but we had wonderful views of this enormous colony. So there were thousands of juvenile Adelie penguins, all in between the white-bellied adults, and the juveniles are all kind of huddled against the rain that was happening at the time, but they're all the ones with the fur coats on, the dark fur. So another big wide shot, and you can just see a couple of the Adelies in the water porpoising as we chug along. Tens of thousands of Adelies in this colony, truly, truly vast. And it smells very fishy because they're eating krill, and all of the penguins are crying out, braying, and that sound is almost overwhelmed by the sound of the sea because these waves are absolutely crashing into shore. So you got this cacophony of sound going on. On a little iceberg, a southern giant petrel. There are these birds that are tube noses. That's how they have this tube on top of their beak that helps them to expel the salt. They get an awful lot of salt in their diet. Whoops. 3 Adelies chilling on a iceberg there. And mysterious and wonderful shapes. Yeah, it's not a very hospitable place, but the penguins seem to really like it. And there we are in our zodiacs, all going back to the ship. Some more shots of that bay. Quite spectacular with all these chunks of ice floating around. Little ones are called bergy bits. So we're close here to a tidewater glacier that keeps calving off pieces. And so from the ship, you can see the landscape is pretty foreboding. Just to give you an idea how the zodiacs are managed, we go down those staircases, the gangways down to the zodiacs. When we come back up those same stairs. And then the zodiacs are lifted up with a big crane, and they are plunked on top of the ship, and so ready to go next time. We usually had 2 outings a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Another shot at that glacier. And the leading edge by the sea. And the ice was just endlessly fascinating. And you can really see here these It really looks like a line drawing. You know, you could quite easily sit there with an easel and just draw that. It's just gorgeous. Another shot leaving that area, and the sun is going down. Yeah, but we've got some other islands that we're cruising past. And we're in the Erebus and Terror Gulf on the west side of the Weddell Sea. So this is east of the Antarctic Peninsula. And these islands are pretty much all volcanic. This one is Vega Island. I don't have the names for many of them. So yeah, this piece of ice, all these lines of dirt mark the annual melt of the glacier. And so each year there's melt in the summer, which exposes the dirt. And then there's more snow that makes a white band and then another dark band and so on. So it's almost as if it's like tree rings. A few more Adelies on ice. A South Polar skua hanging around. These guys are predators of penguin chicks and eggs, and they're pretty much a cleanup crew. So I said here, what color is ice anyway? Many shades. We've got green, gray, brown, shades of blue, shades of white. It's kind of amazing to see. Here's another tidewater glacier, and there's a terminal moraine out front there. That line of dirt is what the glacier has pushed forward, so it's been receding since then. That blue is absolutely true color, not enhanced in any way. Another tabular iceberg. Another gorgeous line drawing, which is actually a photograph. And here you can see these red-brown, iron-rich slopes of the eroding mountains, and it gives you a real hint of the volcanic origins here. Another shot of Vega Island. So here we're going to go to Snow Hill Island on the Weddell Sea side of the Antarctic Peninsula. And here we got to visit the historic hut of this early explorer, Otto Nordenskjöld, who was there from 1901 to 1903. And the little red and blue tents there are the modern camp of Chilean scientists. So Nordenskjöld, he got stranded there for several years, and part of his party was stranded in another place. So anyway, they made it out, and his hut is now considered a historic site. But here it is on the top of this little hill, and it's actually, the hill is actually eroding because of global warming, melting the permafrost underneath. So the Chilean scientists are there to try to stabilize the hill. You can see some of the work here they're doing to reinforce that hillside. And otherwise the hut would disintegrate and fall down the hill and into the high tide. So this gives you an idea right here. This whole hillside has been slumping away, and there's an exposed pingo, which is an ice lens in the ground. And so this is direct evidence of the melting of permafrost, largely attributed to global warming. There's the coastline of Snow Hill Island. It is a much bigger island than it appears on the map. At the very south end of that island is an emperor penguin colony, and there were thoughts that we would go visit it, but apparently the ice to the southern end was very thick, and there would be no way of us getting close enough to the emperor colony, sadly. Imperial cormorants, though, were flying by. We had quite a few of those. There's the side of the peak of Snow Hill Island. Pretty spectacular place, and the scale is unimaginable. It's really, really huge. A few more icebergs. Humpback whale went by, and that was nice to see. It was fairly far from the ship, though, so these are zoomed in a lot. Next up is Coburn Island, and we're going there to see another Adelie colony. And this shot right here is about 1/10 of the total Adelie colony on Coburn Island. More Adelies on the ice. And they're porpoising through the water all over the place, trying to avoid the fur seals that are probably pretty hungry. So here's one just walking along the shoreline. He's just got out of the water, and he's sneaking past the seal, which is sleeping. So, yep, so they're all timid, and they go to the water in a little huddle, but they'll stand on the shoreline for a long time before any of them actually finds the courage to hit the water. But they're just so cute and comical, walking along the shoreline just like little people. You can also see in this shot the brush tails. These are one of the brush-tailed penguins. So obviously their tails are very much like a little brush. They launch right out of the water as quickly as they can. They don't want to be in the shallows near the jaws of the seals. And then we've got an Antarctic tern flying by, and more penguins. And then we're coming over to the Imperial Cormorant colony at the tip of Coburn Island. We had some kayakers on the trip, and this was a pretty cool shot with the cormorants flying right over the heads of the kayakers. So there's an imperial cormorant, lovely blue eyes on these guys. And there's the colony. And you might have noticed these guys create whitewash all over their rookery. The penguins, it's pink wash. And that's as a result of what they eat. The penguins eat krill, which are like small shrimp. And so their poop is pink. We also had kelp gulls here. There's an adult with a juvenile. A couple more adults. They're amazingly white, you know, just pure white, pure black on these guys. Very fun. Snowy sheathbill, it's the only land bird in Antarctica, and they are scavengers. That ugly face has a purpose we'll talk about in a while. So they're foraging at the water line while the cormorants are resting. The sheathbills will eat anything and everything. They're part of the cleanup crew. So yeah, how can you tell this is a cormorant colony? Because of the whitewash. It's not pink wash. So you can tell what you're looking at from quite far away. And there's our ship, the Ocean Endeavor. It's a really great ship to be on. The Art of Ice, again, beautiful things that you could make drawings of that just really appeal to the artistic nature of me. And here we are at Paulette Island, even more Adelie penguins and imperial cormorants, and still no place for a shore landing. We thought at first that these were penguins, but they're actually cormorants all huddled against the snow that's falling. But then we found one single chinstrap penguin atop that iceberg, and he was, you know, wide awake and chipper and giving us a nice show. Lots of Adelies were porpoising through the water. Just amazing to see these guys. And we actually had one jump onto the front end of a Zodiac, and there was just the Zodiac driver, one of the gals on the crew of the ship. She was absolutely startled to see this penguin land right on the front of her Zodiac. She didn't have any passengers at the time. So yeah, here's the Adelies trying to enter the water, but being real scaredy cats. Here's a northern giant petrel scavenging on a carcass. And the beachmaster, big male Antarctic fur seal. They do like to terrorize the Adelies. So you can see the Adelies here really keeping their distance. Here's the snowy sheathbill with 2 half-grown chicks. So the sheathbills have no feathers on their face because, like vultures, they eat carrion, they eat poop, spilled krill, whatever they can find that's organic, they will eat it. So they don't want to have dirty feathers on their face. So they keep themselves clean by just having a bare face. So there's a ruined stone hut here that was also left from the expedition of Otto Nordenskjöld. And so the ruins are still there, and the penguins have really taken over the place. There's some fences there. They tried at one point to fence it off, but didn't really have any success. So they've just let the ruins go to the penguins. Here's a southern giant petrel scavenging a dead penguin. So it happens all the time that the penguins are very, very numerous, and so they are going to be the food for many other species. They're plentiful, really, for that reason. So there's a northern giant petrel. Note the salt drip. Now, if you look, the southern giant petrel has a greenish tip to the bill, and then the northern has a pink tip to the bill. And otherwise, they pretty much look mostly identical. You can also see the salt drip on the end of the beak there. And who says penguins can't fly? They absolutely can. Wilson's storm petrels, again, flying all around. And a South Polar skua flying through the snowstorm. And here we have these amazing mountains with this ice sheet meeting the sea. And yeah, some of the mountains just absolutely look like pyramids, which is pretty cool. And this iceberg obviously calved off of that sheet in the background. There's another island, kind of looks like it might be a volcanic core. Brown skuas, this one's riding on a very tenuous piece of ice, which is mostly out of the water when the wave recedes. So next we come to Brown Bluff, a very famous spot. It has a huge Adelie and Gentoo penguin colony. And so here's a bit of a shot. The scale of this place is just unbelievable. Here's where the ice sheet meets the sea. And we have to maneuver very carefully through all this pack ice. It's very chock-a-block with ice there. So here's a southern brown skua. And we're in the Zodiacs, getting closer. There's a crab-eater seal laying on a floe. Big dome of the volcano there. Yeah, here are the famous cliffs of Brown Bluff. And this iceberg was pretty photogenic. And it had many, many faces that were fascinating to see. We just wanted to drive all the way around it in the Zodiac so that we could see all these aspects of it. And we're coming up to landing on Brown Bluff, and you can see all that pink stuff on that shoreline. That's the penguin colony. So on shore, Adelies and Gentoos are neighbors, and they both build nests made from stones. So a male will give the female a gift of a nice stone to build a nest, and it's very cute to see him. Gentoo penguins have these white spots on their heads. It looks like they're wearing headphones, and they have black faces. While the Adelies have black faces and a completely white belly and no headphones. So they're not difficult to tell apart. Gentoos also have orange feet and a red-orange line on their beak, and while the Adelies have a bit of pink on their beak and they have pink feet. They seem to be quite particular about their personal space, don't come too near. And the chicks are molting and resting all over the place. We were there in end of January, beginning of February. So this was, the chicks were half grown at this point. And the adults like to be watchful and watch out for those skuas that will dive in and steal a chick. But here's a crash of Gentoo chicks that's waiting for the molt before they can go out to sea. So they all huddle together for safety. Here's a chick that's looking to be fed by a parent. And they do this thing, the parent walks away and the chicks run after the parent. And so this chase goes on sometimes for quite a while. And that's how the parent knows that this is its chick and not to some other chick that's trying to freeload. The chick taps at the adult's beak to stimulate the vomit reflex. And then there you get the krill being regurgitated for the little one. Another southern giant petrel cruising overhead looking for free meal. And this is about the cutest little Gentoo I saw. So big scene here. You can see by the density of the pink that those penguins actually spend a lot of time right in that area. That pink is very, very deep. And a south polar skua is flying overhead, seeking an unattended chick or perhaps an egg that's been abandoned. And here's a scene with all the variety of penguins and the zodiacs all waiting there to take us back to the ship. As I said before, the scale of the mountains here is just unbelievable. It's more huge than you could possibly imagine. Right on the beach, there was a boulder eroded out of the cliff, and it contains lava bombs from a time of really violent volcanic eruptions. So I just thought this was a wonderful thing to see. Lava bombs. And you might say that all this ice on the beach looks kind of like diamonds. There's a beach in Iceland that has ice on it like this. They call it Diamond Beach. And so this is kind of the same thing. So now we are leaving the Antarctic Peninsula and we're on our way to Elephant Island. And here it is. The next morning we arrive and it is absolutely shrouded in fog. This place features hugely in the story of the Shackleton expedition of 1914 to 1917. Shackleton's ship got stuck in the ice and they had to row. They had 3 lifeboats and they rowed hundreds of miles to Elephant Island, where they fetched up. This is Point Wild, where 22 men sheltered for 4 months under the upturned lifeboats with only penguins and a few seals to eat. Point Wild was named for Jack Wild, who was Shackleton's right-hand man, and he found this spot against all odds, and it was the only place on Elephant Island where they could set up a camp. The only place that was flat enough. Elephant Island just rises right out of the sea. So they've got, some snow and ice on both sides of the little point here. So they did have a bit of water supply from the ice. But the campsite was barely above high water. And yeah, they had a few seals to eat, but mostly penguins is how they survived. Shackleton took one of the lifeboats. They built a cover for it out of some spare wood that they had. And he sailed it all the way to South Georgia, sailed and rowed all the way to South Georgia, a distance of like 800 miles. Amazing. So yeah, these glaciers were their only source of fresh water. And the chinstrap penguin colony sustained these men for 4 months, 22 men living under an upturned lifeboat. The monument there is to Luis Pardo, captain of the Chilean vessel, the Yelcho, which finally was able to rescue the stranded explorers. There were, I think, 3 other ships that had tried to get there before the Yelcho, but finally the Yelcho made it, and they were able to send a lifeboat out to pick up the men. They left everything, including their diaries. They were in such a hurry to get off the island, and someone went back the next year to try and retrieve the artifacts, and everything was gone. So there's that spot, an amazing place, and the fog did lift in time for us to see most of it. So now we're in the Scotia Sea, and we have some calm before a storm. The winds are going to pick up, and that will bring the seabirds in. So now we're going from Elephant Island to South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. So South Georgia is way to the east of everything else that we've seen. So that's an overnight trip. Northern giant petrel is following the ship there, along with Royal albatross, Cape petrels again. And the sea often looked kind of gray like this, but sometimes the sun came out and turned it all blue. And yeah, it actually was 2 nights across the Scotia Sea to get to South Georgia. Even when it was foggy, though, we had chances to see these giant birds that were following the ship. This is a northern giant petrel, Royal albatross. And dawn the next day, we got to South Georgia. So Shackleton landed on the west side of South Georgia and had to traverse the mountains to get to the whaling stations on the east side. We, in our ship, we just went around to the east side to avoid the storm that was coming across the Scotia Sea. So here is a map of South Georgia, and so most of those places on the east side, Stromness, Grytviken, Gotthol, those were all places we visited, along with a couple of other spots on the southeastern side. So here we're approaching Grytviken, which is a historic whaling station. And we've got kelp gulls, a whole bunch of them loafing on the side of the cliff. And this was our first view of king penguins, which are really, really numerous in South Georgia. A nice rainbow announced our arrival. And we just had a really beautiful morning approaching there. So now we're on shore walking towards the old whaling station, and we're going to stop in at the cemetery. There's a baby Antarctic fur seal on the way. This guy was incredibly cute. Crossing over a little creek, we've got a juvenile king penguin that's trying to pick off all his baby fur. An Antarctic fur seal. The colors of the fur seals are really neat here. We had a whole lot of variation from silver to dark gray to even blonde. Elephant seals, of course, act like they own the place because they kind of do, you know, they can go wherever they want. So they're all loafing around here. You see one on the right there that is molting. So they come ashore for a fairly long period of time to molt, and they just lay around. Here we are in the cemetery, who's the graves of Frank Wild, Shackleton's right-hand man, and Shackleton's grave as well. He actually died of a heart attack, and his wife said, leave him in South Georgia. He loves it there. So they did. So the path coming back down from the cemetery was kind of impassable at this particular moment. We had to take a detour because, you know, those elephant seals go where they want, and you don't want to get too close to those guys. They could really hurt you. They weigh a lot, 1,000 to 4,500 pounds, and they can be very aggressive if you get too close, and especially if they have young. And apparently they can outrun a human if they really want to. So they can absolutely move. So here's one of the fur seals that has a golden coat. Lovely to see these variations. A massive piece of whale bone on the shore had to have been here for a century or more. Kind of looks like a pelvic bone. More molting young king penguins, along with a few fur seals. And the seals just fall asleep wherever they are, and it's kind of fun to see that relaxation. You know, sleep like a baby, sure, but wouldn't you rather sleep like a fur seal? There's a couple of kings that might be a pair, but I'm not sure. So the king penguins are the most colorful of the penguins, and the emperors are similar. They're a bit taller, but they're much paler. So the kings are quite good to see visually. So here we are coming up to the whaling station, and here's this old whaling ship, rusting hulk. It's called the Petrel. And it was kind of disturbing to see that it still had its harpoon gun still intact. But this place is a museum, so that's okay. The endemic South Georgia yellow-billed pintail. There was a few of these around, and great to see. They are omnivorous birds. They've learned to scavenge. They're possibly the only meat-eating duck in the world. So there was a few of them, and there was actually a flock of about 12 went right over us at one point, but I didn't get a shot of that. Here's a South Polar skua just hanging out. And these tanks are just a few of the many, many tanks there that contained the whale oil that lit the lamps of Europe. You know, before they invented electricity, they had whale oil. And the baleen from some of the whales was used to make stays in women's corsets. So the fur seals and whale bones are everywhere at this place. Seals and skuas, they don't seem to like each other very much. And rust is the color of history. Lots and lots of rusty things. Wilson Storm Petrel came really close to shore. Nice to see them that close. And it's such a beautiful bay. It's really hard to imagine the absolute slaughter that happened here, 100 to 200 years ago. So now we're leaving Grytviken, and we've got a black-browed albatross following the ship. And here's a shot of those mountains that Shackleton had to traverse in order to get to Stromness to get help to rescue the rest of his expedition members. It was an absolutely crazy trek that he had to do across those mountains, across glaciers. But somehow they made it. It took them, I think, 3 days, and they slept very little in that 3 days. They just kept on plugging on and plugging on. There's a white-chinned petrel. These birds are pretty much all black, but under the beak, there's a tiny bit of white, so that's the white chin. Another light-mantled albatross, and the South Polar skua, slender-billed prion, and Antarctic terns migrate from the Arctic to the Antarctic. It's the longest migration of any bird in the world. Another Cape petrel. And I believe on the ship, I got the first sighting of the macaroni penguins swimming off of South Georgia's east coast. And we did see some in a colony later on, but these were the first ones that were seen on the trip. I was quite happy to get shot to these. They were a bit far from the ship, so the pictures are not great, but I got it. So there's the east coast. Gray-headed albatross flying by. And here we can see that bad weather that kept us from the west coast and made the ship go around to the east coast. We had lovely weather on the east coast, but very stormy on the other side. Here we are approaching Stromness, and this geologic formation, this anticline, is this amazing visual sight when you come into the harbor of Stromness. So Shackleton spotted it from top of a nearby mountain, and he was on the pass, and he looked over the water and saw this, and he knew that they were in the right place. Their navigation had been correct, and they were near Stromness, which had a whaling station where they would find help. And so Shackleton descended these mountains by climbing down a waterfall, which is just to the right of this scene. We can't actually see it. It's beside that big outcrop. So that waterfall now bears his name. And he was able to climb down it and then come into the whaling station and get help, even though nobody recognized him because he was so filthy with a months of beard and ragged clothes. But once he said who he was, they all scrambled to give him assistance. Here's the cliffside colony there of the endemic South Georgia shags. So another type of cormorant, and these guys only live in South Georgia, the South Orkney, and South Sandwich Islands. There's one giving us a nice flyby. And there's the headland, the entrance of Stromness Harbor. And we're coming up to the whaling station. But this is a historic site, which is actually falling apart. And so you can't actually enter it. It's too much risk of things falling on you. So we got to see the tussock grass area in the Big Valley. So there's a colony of Antarctic fur seals that are all hiding in the tussock grass. They love resting inside that grass. And then there's fur seals and king penguins. They are loving this glacial outwash plain. And there's another pale colored fur seal. And a whole lot of king penguins hanging out near the ruins. Again, more young king penguins molting. And there are literally thousands of fur seals that are stretched out all over this valley. And hundreds of king penguins. A few gentoos are on the beach hanging out with the seals. And this brown skua has picked up a couple of seed pods. They're kind of like burrs. Not sure what they are. Another brown skua. And on the beach, a whale spinal column partially buried. And that has to have been there for over 100 years. There's that spinal column. And the beach is just full of whale bones everywhere you look. King penguins are courting all over the place. They have pretty much year-round breeding season, as it takes them 14 to 16 months to breed, raise, lay an egg, incubate it, raise the chick, right from start to finish. It's an 14 to 16 month process. So you can see at any time eggs or chicks in this colony. There's some gentoos patrolling the beach. They're kind of funny the way they waddle. Another really young baby fur seal. There's the bigger landscape, just enormous and beautiful. And here's a young one that's been chilling out on the top of the hummock of the tussock grass. These hummocks are 2 to 3 feet above the level of the land. There's an Arctic tern. And yeah, you see how these seals, I'm not sure how they get up there, but somehow they do. And they just think this is like a feather bed. So there's another little blonde fur seal. Incredibly cute. And there's an elephant seal, female, lying among the fur seals here. And she gets up to go for a dip. Juvenile male elephant seals practice to compete for females, so they're banging their necks together and roaring at each other. Staying out of their way is, in fact, a very good idea. So I was searching for the longest time for the South Georgia pipit. It's an endemic bird to South Georgia, and it used to be endangered. It's the only songbird in Antarctica. It's made a remarkable comeback since they did a rat eradication program on South Georgia. That was completed in 2015. And I spent the longest time looking for these pipits. And finally, I found one. And then I found another one. And then another one. So then I couldn't stop seeing them, which was kind of wonderful. Anyway, South Georgia now has this enormous program of biosecurity to protect against invasive species. And they've eradicated lots of things that were introduced by the whalers and early people. So he's a chubby little guy, so he's getting lots of food from in amongst the kelp and the seaweed. And they're kind of sassy, you know, and they'll poke around among the rocks. More southern giant petrels. Actually, there's a southern and a northern there in that shot. And an elephant seal coming ashore. South Georgia shag with these amazing blue eyes. You get, at lower tides, you get these amazing scenes of the kelp on the shoreline. A whole posse of king penguins is going for a walk here. None of these guys have eggs, but keep an eye out on those lower bellies because we are going to see some with eggs. And yeah, the whalers left bones everywhere, all kinds of bones. Which way, guys? There's a northern giant petrel. Sorry, my caption is wrong there. Elephant seals, Antarctic fur seals, king penguins, and gentoo penguins are all in this shot. So it gives you a real feel for the variety of wildlife there. Another elephant seal. Fur seal, nice and wet, coming out of the water. Oh, and here's this seaweed and kelp that just lines the shorelines along Stromness Bay. And obviously the tide is out, and so you've got all this stuff visible on the edge. And every time a wave comes in, it all waves, and you know, the tendrils are all moving, kind of like a mermaid's hair, you know. So maybe this is where the early sailors got the idea of mermaids. There's another pipit along that shoreline. And you can see the waves splashing up there. And so this guy is foraging, even though it's very wet where he is. A couple of kelp gulls with the fur seals. And snowy sheathbills. Yeah, so they do eat feces, carrion, spilled krill, whatever they can get. I was really impressed with the lichen and mosses that are growing on these rocks. Really beautiful colors. Here's a South Polar skua, which again is part of the cleanup crew. It's a South Georgia shag and a kelp gull. And a couple more South Georgia shags. St. Andrews Bay has an even bigger, an enormous king penguin colony. And there's a tidewater glacier there that is receding like mad, very unhealthy. Look at all the dirt on the top of it. So this is dirt that has been blown in by the wind, but also it's dirt, stones and gravel, whatever, that has melted out of the glacier. So the glacier melts and leaves all that stuff on the surface. So yeah, lots of evidence here of big time melting happening. Here, it's no longer a tidewater glacier. It's just left this enormous glacial till plain for the animals to occupy. There's some more young male elephant seals practicing for competition, and the king penguins are staying away from that stuff. And this guy's actually yawning. There's a pile of elephant seals that are molting. Nice full crop on this one. Tells you that he's eaten recently, he or she. And that's a good close-up of the face of a snowy sheathbill, so you can actually see how that, it's sort of crusty looking, but you know, no feathers, so it's easier to clean. And a single gentoo among all of these much bigger penguins. Gentoos would show up just all by themselves in unlikely places, so it was like a where's Waldo situation. I kind of like the feet of the penguins. This is the feet of the king penguins, nice and black and scaly, with quite formidable claws that enable them to climb rocks. And now we have a situation here. There's an egg which has either been dropped or been stolen. So the king penguins carry the eggs on their feet and they cover it with brood patch. In the background there, just behind that egg, you can see another king penguin with a bulge just above its feet. And that one is, in fact, carrying an egg. And you can see a few more over to the right. But this egg has been dropped, or perhaps the penguin has been attacked by a skua and forced to drop that egg. So the skuas are coming in, and they're looking forward to a meal here, but they have to establish possession. There's a pecking order, apparently. And the parents are looking on kind of helplessly, you know, that's their egg, but they can do nothing about it. And a lot of crowing is going on the part of the skuas. And finally, one of them takes a stab at the egg and begins to eat the contents. But a northern giant petrel horns in on the action, and he's a lot bigger, so the skuas give way. Anyway, you do see young king penguins. The chicks are at every stage of development here. This colony is used year round because of that 14 to 16 month long breeding season that overlaps the seasons of the year. Eggs are carried on the feet, and there's incubation in the brood pouch. They don't make nests at all. Here's a group going for a swim. Another snowy sheathbill. And I really like this shot because of the moisture. It was kind of a Scotch mist when we were there, a very gentle rain. So these guys, it's not water off a duck's back, it's water off a penguin's back. So they keep themselves pretty waterproof. You can see by the force of the waves there that this, you know, it's really a wild place. Beak color, not sure, but it may be an indication of the age of the king penguins or some kind of variation. But it was interesting to see that there is, in fact, variation in the beak color. Here's a bunch of Gen 2 chicks in molt and more fur seals all loafing in the tussock grass. And you get this braying, you know, the kings will call. It's a noisy place there. You know, a lot of them are calling out. And beside the braying one, there is a king penguin with an egg in the pouch. And you can see how it holds its foot up to keep the egg there. Now we're in Gold Harbor, and this is a chinstrap penguin colony. We didn't get to go ashore there. This is just a Zodiac cruise by. Scenic place, though. And lots of volcanic rock all over the place. Now we're in Cooper Bay. Again, absolutely spectacular scenery. And here we've got macaroni penguin colony. This is the only colony of macaronis that we saw on the whole trip. And the only place, apart from the ones I saw in the water, this is the only place we saw macaronis. So they have this wonderful hairdo. So, you know, it's like the British guys that returned from Italy back in Victorian age with fancy hats with feathers, you know. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called him Macaroni. So that's how these guys got their name. They're just like the macaroni Italian guys. So they are classified as vulnerable, and overfishing of krill is a problem. Anytime you're buying things that are enhanced with omega-3, vitamins or fish or whatever. It's because these giant trawlers are in the Antarctic taking krill out of the waters. But if you don't have krill in Antarctica, you don't have penguins and you don't have whales and many other creatures. The krill are really the essence of all life in Antarctica. You can see these guys really like these rocky places. And it's amazing to me how they manage to climb up these rocks with just claws and a beak, but they do it. So we had a fairly quick drive-by in a Zodiac of this colony. We were not able to go ashore there at all. But some of these guys were just, posing for us quite nicely. And the sea is really formidable here. The waves just come in and just pound that shoreline. Where's Waldo? You can see Waldo, the biggest penguin, right in the middle on the top of the rock. That's the Gentoo penguin with the white earphones that has somehow come ashore in the macaroni penguin colony. And there's another snowy sheathbill right at the front, looking for some poop to eat. Yeah, that lone Gentoo among the macaronis it's kind of a comical thing to see. Yep, no landings here, but look at the steepness of that slope. They're all going up to nest up at the top of there. And there's the top of the cliff. Quite something that they get up there. So they also nest in the stones. And there's that sea with the seaweed, all that kelp swirling around. So elsewhere in Cooper Bay is a large Gentoo colony, and they're climbing way up that scree slope. They're looking for the rocks, and because they like to nest in stony ground and build their nests out of stones. So there they are, way up that hillside. Another southern giant petrel. You can really see that greenish tip of the bill. And here we have a really uncommon white morph southern giant petrel in the middle of this grouping, with Wilson storm petrels, more regular southern giant petrels, and even a northern giant petrel. And we've got a leopard seal coming in, cruising for a meal. These guys are voracious predators. This was the only place we saw a leopard seal. And it was coming really close to our Zodiac and taking a look at us. Apparently they've been known to bite Zodiacs now and again, but we didn't have that pleasure, fortunately. And some lovely crags for the kelp gulls and the shags. Another South Georgia shag. And there's a colony on top of this outcrop. And another glacier way over there. And you can see the terminal moraine right at the front. These piles that have been left by the glacier, and then it's receded a long way from there. So this is our chart of South Georgia with all the places we visited. So all those blue arrows show, and the red ones show the places we went to. Here's Fortuna Bay. Here's another terminal moraine that's even got grass growing on it because that glacier has receded back for quite a long time. Elephant seals here with that massive terminal moraine behind them. Antarctic tern and seals, king penguins. And yeah, so this is an antler of a deer. South Georgia has completed this huge project to eliminate invasive introduced species on the islands. Rats, mice, stoats, goats, and deer are all gone. Dandelions are still being eradicated with sprays. Every time they see one, they spray it. So when you go to South Georgia, you're checked for seeds on your boots and clothes before you leave the ship. And every time you're coming on and off the ship, you have to dip your boots in disinfectant and yeah, the whole thing is really efficient and very thorough. So now deer antlers are all that remain of that species on the island. As a group of king penguins. This was a cave where teams of sealers would shelter when they would get dropped off here, and their job was just to kill the seals every time they came onto the shore. And they would skin the seals, eat the seals, but I'm sure a lot of the seal meat went to waste. Seal fur hats and coats were very, very popular in Europe during that age. And so there was a lot of human predation of these creatures there. Another blonde Antarctic fur seal here. More king penguins. And a nursing seal pup. Curiously, this was the only one I managed to get a picture of, but there were babies and adult seals all over the place. Taking a look at us. And yeah, there's lots of seals in that picture, but most of them are hidden in the tussock grass. More Wilson storm petrels really close to shore here. Neat to see. Antarctic terns. And this enormous plain that I would imagine had once been filled with ice. And here from the Zodiac is a bit of the remaining glacier that reaches the sea. And we're leaving Fortuna Bay. So there's the southwest shore of South Georgia, a Cape petrel and a white-chinned petrel flying by, southern giant petrel. Sei whales came fairly close to the ship. There was a whole pod of them, a whole family. And so, you know, when you get a lot of whales like that all blowing, it's kind of like whale soup, and a few chinstrap penguins on that ice there. And a white-chinned petrel flying over the penguins. And we say goodbye to South Georgia, and our next destination got changed big time. We were supposed to go to the Falkland Islands, but there was a hurricane coming through the Drake Passage into the Scotia Sea. There were 50-knot winds near the Falkland Islands, and there was no way that we could have made port in Stanley. So we headed south to the South Orkney Islands. Sometimes you see things in the ice. Could this be a whale? It's pretty neat to see stuff like that. An ocean liner. Hilltop fort. Your imagination kind of goes wild. Anyway, here we are in the South Orkney Islands, and we're entering Fitchie Bay on the north side of Coronation Island. And here's a chinstrap colony. they're obviously making use of that lovely cave. Southern giant petrel floating by, and chinstrap penguins porpoising through the water. Love to see these guys. And again, a really forbidding place with no landing sites. So we're just cruising around, checking out the coastline and the icebergs. There's a big glacier. So here's a look at the size of that chinstrap colony, and they go looks like they're going all the way nearly to the top of that cliff. It's pretty amazing how they get up so high, but they do. And there's a glacier coming right down to the sea, and more flying penguins. And this iceberg, the side of it is all shiny because it's been melted a bit by the sun. And the sun was really quite strong there. So this was pretty spectacular, this lovely pyramid. And the receding glacier left another terminal moraine here. More chin straps. You can see chin straps have a white face. It's how you tell them from the Adelies. Adelies have a black face. The chin straps also have this lovely black line below their chin. So yeah, chin strap is very aptly named. More glacier crashing into the sea. And brown skuas, of course, are everywhere. And you can see the chicks in this colony are a little bit smaller than some of the other colonies that we were at. Raising babies is a really dirty business, and there's often a lot of spillage going on. Chin straps are another kind of brush-tailed penguin, and that one on the left, you can really see the brush tail there. And this looks like a cave. We were not able to go close. You can't go close to the tidewater glaciers because they might calve off at any time and swamp your zodiac or worse. Lots of elephant seals and Antarctic fur seals here, and you can see the waves here are just crashing right up against that shore. So it must shelve off really deep. Not much of shallows there. A few more chin straps. And the seals cavorting in the water. Penguins are braving the waves to try and get in and out. And seems like they time their jumps into the water, into the crest of the wave, so that then the water will take them out quite quickly. There's a really big collapse of the front edge of that glacier there. Big collapse into the sea. Glacial outwash beach here. Both elephant and fur seals there, along with a gentoo and a chinstrap penguin there. So another Where's Waldo right there. And there's a juvenile kelp gull with the chinstrap penguin. A few more adults and chicks. And more icebergs. So this is my favorite iceberg. And so a little bit about how the colors come across, how they happen. So this iceberg is kind of upside down, and the dark area would have been a flow under the glacier, a river under the glacier that refroze. And so it changed the color of the ice. And so then many centuries later, it has calved off, come out into the bay, and at some point it flipped upside down to reveal this ancient river that was frozen in the ice. So pretty cool and pretty beautiful. Here's a trifecta of pinnipeds, an elephant seal, a bunch of Antarctic fur seals, and a Weddell seal, all in the same place. Nice to see. There's the Weddell seal, giving us a look. What are you doing here? More chin straps. And here's a crab eater seal. So we actually had 4 species of seals there. And yeah, the feeding of chicks is really messy. And that cleanup crew, the snowy sheathbill, is picking up a piece of spilled krill. I think these chicks could be the cutest. You know, this light gray color is very attractive. All grouping. The pink feet of these guys kind of matches the pink that's on the inside of their flippers. And then we're saying goodbye to Fitchie Bay, and we're going to head south and go to the other side of Coronation Island. And there's our ship with the chinstrap porpoising across the bay. And we're now approaching the Sunshine Glacier on the south side of the island, an enormous glacier. And this massive wall is up to 60 meters high where it meets the sea. And it's a steep slope, so this ice is just cracking and crashing down into the sea. Lots of icebergs. These spires look like they're about ready to go. And that chunk up there just could crash down from that cliff. So we have to get to through these chunks of ice to get to our landing site. And we're actually going to come up on the side of the glacier and explore a bit of the lateral moraine. So here we are on shore, standing on the lateral moraine, looking at that massive glacier. And here's me. I am forbidden. We all were forbidden to walk on the glacier because you never know if there's a crevasse going to open up. And so I said, well, okay, take my picture beside it. So here we are. So this lateral moraine on the side is just full of jumbles of things that have been carried down the mountain by ages and ages of glacier. And you can see this glacier has been melting a lot as well. There's a terminal moraine at the bottom of the hill. There are little pools, these lovely little mountain pools all over the place. And lots of rocks, and spectacular place though. And there's the edge of that receding glacier, and you can see how dirty that is on top. All of these rocks have melted out of the ice. Seal down on the shoreline, yawning. We're saying goodbye now to Sunshine Glacier and Coronation Island, and we're arriving at Signey Island. More penguins, of course, here. Everywhere we went, it seemed like there was some kind of penguins. These are chin straps there. Cute guy. And this was the only base we came near. There's lots of bases in Antarctica, scientific bases. This is Signey Research Station, which is part of the UK. You see that fence behind the station? That's to prevent the elephant seals from actually coming in and harming the workings of the station. So that fence actually goes a long way across the island to defend the base. This is a little hut on the other side of the point. We actually saw that guy. He came out, sat on a rock, and ate his lunch and waved at us. And more chin straps, 2 snowy sheathbills, and a brown skua there. And here's a bigger scene. So these guys actually seem to have more or less steps to get in and out of the water in this bay. Blue-eyed shag colony on top. Here's the blue-eyed shags and giant petrels. And a nice little nesting place underneath an overhang for these guys. A fur seal with a blue-eyed shag and nice mouth there. I would not want to be anywhere near those teeth. Another blue-eyed shag. Chinstrap penguin. And where's Waldo again? A lone Gentoo penguin with an elephant seal, which has somehow managed to get itself up on top of this shelf, which is quite high up from the sea. Here's that Gentoo. And a chinstrap, nice and wet. He just jumped out of the water. The elephant seals were keeping an eye on us. And different icebergs again. And now we're leaving the South Orkney Islands and we're heading back to the Drake Passage. So here we go, back across the Scotia Sea and back to Ushuaia, wandering albatross. Northern giant petrel, Cape petrels, white chin petrels, Antarctic prion, Wilson storm petrels. It's kind of nice. We've got enough wind on the return journey that we actually picked up a whole lot of these seabirds. But again, it wasn't very rough. So we were saying goodbye to the Drake Lake as we got back to Tierra del Fuego. And these islands appear out of the ocean. Oh, we got dusky dolphins showed up beside the ship. They weren't that close though, and they're moving very fast, so the pictures are a bit blurry, but they are a record of what we saw. Black-browed albatross. We had a lot of those as we came into the Beagle Channel. Southern giant petrel again, and imperial cormorants now, because they're the most common cormorant around Tierra del Fuego. So we're entering the Beagle Passage and we get South American terns. There's a Magellanic penguin in the Beagle Channel. We actually went right past the island where there's a huge colony of Magellanic penguins along with Gentoos. Our only sighting of rock shag or Magellanic cormorant. These guys flew by. They have red faces, so they're quite distinctive. We had them fly over the ship as well, but again, flying really fast, and we're on a moving ship, so the pictures are unfortunately not great, but it's a record of the sighting. As we came into the channel, we got a wonderful show of lenticular clouds. These clouds that form that look like lenses, and that was pretty spectacular. More black-browed albatrosses. And a bait ball happened beside the ship. So we had albatrosses, skuas, petrels, terns, penguins, and cormorants all coming in for a feed on whatever fish were on offer that was being corralled by probably larger undersea creatures. South American tern. And all down the Beagle Channel, there are many, many islands and rocky outcrops, so lighthouses everywhere. Here's a Chilean skua. We caught sight of this sei whale near some islands which are a colony of imperial cormorants. There's that colony. There's the imperial cormorants flying by. And here's Isla Martillo, which has both Magellanic and Gentoo penguin colonies. And the occasional kings and chinstraps show up here too. Before I got on the ship, I was able to visit this island, and we saw a huge amount of the colony. Wonderful to see. And there was even a king penguin, a couple of king penguins came ashore there, along with one single chinstrap penguin. So we had 4 species of penguins unexpectedly on that island. You normally see only 2. Another shot at that Isla Martillo. And here comes our pilot. We take a pilot aboard to come into the port. So the Marshall Glacier above the town of Ushuaia has also been receding. It's the water supply for the town. So I think they're hoping there that it will not melt any more than it is, because it used to be just one large glacier. Now it is 3 much smaller ones. So that's a bit of a concern in Ushuaia. Final salute from our albatross companions. Lots of black-browed albatross there, and a whole bunch of them coming in for fish. South American terns. And the final bird sighting from the ship was this flightless steamer duck family. So little ones as well as the adults. Nice to see. A bit of a closer shot of the Marshall Glacier. And it's late in the day. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for coming. Any questions?
Sorry, it looks like we lost Lynette. I was just waiting for her to respond.
That's too bad.
No, she's there. I think she's had to go out and come back in again, so lost the co-host status. Lynette, are you back?
Yes. You blocked me. I couldn't unmute.
Yeah, no, because you must have gone out and come back in
Yes,
again.
I
So
did.
in the process, you lost the host status.
I had to turn the generator off. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. That was really extremely fascinating. Just the landscapes are so incredibly beautiful. And the animals that you saw, in those landscapes, it's really amazing. Wow. Okay, let's see if there are any questions. Derek, I had to log off and then log back in, so I haven't got all the questions in the chat. If you could maybe help with that.
Okay, the first one is from Jaludin Khan in Trinidad and Tobago. Is a great detailed presentation. Can you tell us about the camera you used, how you backed up your photos, and any issues you had photographing condensation, etc.? What was the type of clothing and shoes and that you used, especially in the cold water? And what travel tips could you give to us who, yeah.
So camera. Okay, so I have a Sony RX10 Mark IV, which is officially called a bridge camera. You don't have to change the lenses, which is fabulous. It goes from 24 to 600 millimeters with the fixed lens that it has. And so I'm never in a situation where I've got the wrong lens. And so I love that about it. Now, because it's a fixed lens in that camera, it's all sealed, completely sealed. So you can be in wet situations and the camera will still function. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of issues with condensation. Photographing the foggy scenes, I actually had to darken the photographs once I got home and put them through my editing process. And so I found that, you know, pictures that were really, really white, you know, you had way too much light bouncing off all of those water droplets in the air. So darkening the photo seemed to take away some of that light and made some of the pictures more visible, you know, some of the landscape features more visible. I did take along with me a plastic sleeve that you can buy in just about any camera store, a sleeve that goes over your camera lens. And so you can pull that on or off as required to keep the majority of the water off of the lens. But there was still, I mean, I'm sure you noticed in the pictures, there was still some images that had water droplets in them, simply because you couldn't help it in some of the situations. We had a fair amount of rain, not too much snow, a little bit, and a few sunny days. But yeah, you were always being careful about water. Type of clothing. So they give you a puffy jacket to wear. Well, this is what happened on this particular trip through Adventure Canada and Intrepid. They part of your gear, you're wearing boots that are provided by the ship. I took insoles to wear in the boots to make it more comfortable, and very glad that I did. I had basically snow pants on top of tights or track pants. What else did I have? Oh yeah, I had, for warmer days, I had rain pants on top of whatever my normal pants were. And so for jacket, you're wearing a sweater underneath the puffy jacket that they give you to you take home with you. And then over top of that is what they call a gill jacket. That photograph where I was standing beside the glacier. So I was wearing the purple rain pants with the gill jacket on top. Under the gill jacket was the puffy jacket. So I basically had 3 or 4 layers on, but often I was unzipping because it was too hot, you know. Because you can think of being in Antarctica in January and early February, it's kind of like late winter in Ontario, say. You know, sorry, all you South Africa people, you you won't have a clue what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's often not that cold, but still you're in a very wet environment. So you want to, you know, make sure that you're protected against wet and mud. One other thing is that using your pockets or a fanny pack or something is a good idea, because you cannot put any bag down anywhere in South Georgia or Antarctica, because you might be transmitting something from somewhere else. So I just made sure that whatever I needed to have at hand, say an extra battery for the camera or an extra SD card, a data card, they were always in a fanny pack at my waist. So they were very easily accessible. He was asking about shoes used to walk through the cold water. We always had boots on, and you wear either your snow pants with cuffs or your rain pants with cuffs. and you pull that cuff down over the top of your boot. So if you're disembarking the Zodiac into water, it could be up to your knees. So if you put the cuff inside your boots, you're going to get water right down inside your boots. So you don't want that. So the thing is to, you know, be prepared and follow all the instructions. I mean, any expedition company is going to give you a packing list. There are Facebook pages for Antarctic travelers where people share tips and lots of things like that. So just do a lot of research before you go.
Thanks. And then Pablo asks, he says, excellent presentation, inspiring stories. My question is, what was your experiences with the local residents in South Georgia and the other territories you harbored at? Thank you for all the gorgeous pictures. Were the locals friendly?
So hello, Pablo. So Pablo is my lovely friend from originally from Spain. I met him in New Zealand, and now he's living in Wales. So another world traveler. So we had, I mean, the local residents, the people we encountered at the base on Signe Island. We were not allowed to visit that base because of the COVID quarantine thing. And so we just, you know, waved at them from the Zodiacs. And we actually, one of our Zodiacs dropped off for them a box of fresh fruit and vegetables because they don't get those things there. And they were extremely grateful. We did the same with the Chilean scientists at Snow Hill Island. And, you know, we were able to have conversations with them. We were on the shore with them, but we had to keep, you know, 25 feet away because of the COVID rules.
Yeah.
But we did get sort of some long distance conversations that way. And they were just telling us about what they were doing to reinforce the knoll that the hut was sitting on. So the other territories, South Georgia, we actually had a wonderful experience with the inspector that came aboard the ship. He was a guy from Wales that had lived in the Falkland Islands, and he was a customs inspector, and he had been seconded to South Georgia as part of the biosecurity team. So he came and he actually spent 4 or 5 days with us while we were exploring South Georgia. He spent all that time with us and lived with us on the ship. And so I took the opportunity to sit with him at lunch and stuff and ask him things. And it was quite fascinating to have conversations with him. The other interactions we had with people were with people in Grytviken, because there's nobody lives in any of the other places, but only in Grytviken. There was some museums in Grytviken that are absolutely fascinating. And in one of the museums, they've actually got a reproduction of the lifeboat that Shackleton used to get to from Elephant Island to South Georgia. It's called the James Caird, named after one of the sponsors of that expedition. And anyway, so there was people there you got to chat with. There was people, they had a gorgeous gift shop in Grytviken that joined the museum. And so lots of things about Shackleton there. But, you know, there really weren't opportunities to converse very much with people because the museum and the shop people were just, you know, really busy with all the guests. But I did have a conversation with a fellow who was spraying for dandelions near the ruins of all the oil tanks. And he said, you know, yes, he, you know, usually lives in the Falkland Islands, but he comes to South Georgia for the summer, and his wife works in the museum and so on. And he was trying to point out to me some of the local vegetation and trying to tell me where to look for the pipits, because at this point I hadn't seen the South Georgia pipit yet. And so he said, oh, you got to look on the water line and amongst the seaweed and the rocks, you know, you'll see them there. And oh, great. Okay. So that's about all the interaction we had with local people. Another question, what would you like to do if you had the chance to travel to this region again in the future? And yes, I definitely want to go again because it's fascinating and there's so much to see. And we didn't get to the Falkland Islands, which was totally on my agenda for the trip. Lots of endemic birds in the Falklands. So, and I was feeling like when I got off the ship that time, I was really feeling like, oh my gosh, I totally did not get enough of Antarctica. So I will probably be going again, and I'm looking at another trip to try and get to the other side of the Antarctic Peninsula along with the Falkland Islands next winter, but we'll see.
Are there any other questions before we wrap up? It looks like that's the... And nobody else wants to ask anything. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. That was absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
And for the people that are still around, we do have another Antarctic presentation next week by Wayne Humphreys. So do come back not next week, next month. I seem to be confused about time today, but yes, in December.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Great presentation.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.